Here I am in GIMP. I started this project with a modest Mac Mini computer with GIMP on it rather than Photoshop. I opened the JPEG file that came in from the scanner, and it has the blue grid because I scanned in full color. Now I want to make that grid disappear, and the key idea is to make GIMP, the software, see only blue from the drawing. The white background contains red, green, and blue, and the blue lines contain only blue, or more blue. So if the software is seeing only blue, the lines in the background should look the same. So the key is the channel mixer function under the colors menu. Normally, the output channel of GIMP, the red output channel, sees 100% of the red coming in and none of the green and none of the blue. And the green output channel normally sees none of the red, 100% of the green, and none of the blue. And the blue output channel normally sees none of the red, none of the green, and 100% of the blue. Well, we alter that. So we have the output seeing none of the red coming in, none of the green, but 100% of the blue. And the green output channel is seeing none of the green coming in, but 100% of the blue. And we give that a try. Hit OK, wait. Since it's the high resolution image with a lot of pixels, it takes a few seconds, but we see the blue grid practically disappear. On an inexpensive monitor, it might look like it's gone completely, but that's not good enough to please the Amazon Createspace content monitor robot that's looking for a clean white margin. And you don't know how much of that faint grid is going to be printed. After fiddling with those settings on the channel mixer a little bit, I might find something that's not quite so simple but works a little better. And when I do, I save it and then later open my Eliminate Blue Grid preset. And then I get the same process every time. It's better, but there's still a bit of gray left in the background, plus there may be smudges and other little imperfections. So next I go to the levels function. And in the input levels graph, we see there is some dark gray, that's the drawing, and quite a lot of pixels that are almost white. What I want is for the output of the file to make all of those completely white. In fact, if I drag that pointer way over, I can make even the light grays come out as white. That's too much, but it shows you what the adjustment does. So I set my white arrow just inside that bunch of light gray pixels, and that gets a pretty white background. Then to make my grays a little darker, I slide the middle pointer over. And then once I find settings I like, I write them down or save them. And then I have a preset that I can get out every time and do it the same way. Then I can sample the background and load the eraser with that color and go around and make little corrections. Many happy hours doing stuff like this. You get the idea. And editing, so that can involve things as simple as moving a paragraph around, or if I made a bad numeral 8 in one caption, I can borrow an 8 from somewhere else, copy it, paste it in. So in GIMP what you do is float your selection to move it, slide it somewhere, and then anchor it, and it rejoins the layer that it came from. The Amazon Createspace content reviewer looks carefully to see if there is any content from illustrations bleeding into the margins, and it will flag that as an error. So I found it's a very good idea to draw a border around the artwork and then make everything outside that border perfectly mathematically white, because I selected the option in Amazon Createspace not to bleed illustrations to the edge. Plus, in any pencil illustration, there are going to be little flecks and smudges that you might not notice on the screen that would look bad when printed. And then when I'm done, I save it. After doing a number of pages and beginning to get the idea that this might actually turn into a book, I looked around at the retail world of science books. And my books seemed to be aimed at a young adult clientele. I said it was the book I wish I'd had when I was 13. Turns out the category of young adult nonfiction science books is practically empty except for some biographies. But if you look at science books for children, 10 and younger, a very common format is 8.5 by 11-inch pages with full color inside, about 70 pages, and selling for $10. I knew I was already working in the 8.5 by 11 page format, and I liked the $10 price. A lot of people said, well, you should have color on the inside of your book. But I looked at the Amazon Createspace page for calculating your royalties depending on the size of the book. And it turns out if I used color on the inside, I would be losing money on every copy. Also on Createspace, there is a limit to the size of the PDF file for the interior of the book. It can't be larger than 400 megabytes. And as it was, my 160-page black and white book came out to over 200, so I couldn't have made the size limit with color illustrations anyway. Nonetheless, I kept playing with the idea of color in my mind. There are books of the past, science books that had used color in a very interesting way, other books that had drawings that used color in an interesting way, beautiful graphic novels and zines and comics that used flat color over a page in a beautiful way. So one day I got a coupon from Shutterfly for a free 8 by 8-inch color photo book. So I took them up on it. I took some pages from Sky to Space and colorized them and had them made into a book and kept note of the color that I used on each page. And what I realized from this was that adding color is a whole other art that wasn't part of the original idea of this book. It would be fascinating to be able to do it, but I wasn't going to be able to do it this time. So this is the only copy of the color version. After I had some dozens of pages scanned in and cleaned up in my computer, I began printing them out on ordinary laser printers and putting them together to try to finalize what order the pages might go in, what gaps needed to be filled in, where the chapter breaks might be. So it was only at this stage that I started really outlining the book. Once I had an order of pages that I liked, I made some printouts of the whole thing as I was envisioning it at this particular point. And I sent these preliminary uncorrected proofs, as I call them, to 3 friends for critical comments. And they really were friends because they read the whole thing through. One is a planetarium director, one is a retired astronomy professor, the other is a museum educator who's not particularly connected to planetariums but is very interested and smart. And it's a good thing I did because all of them came back with critical comments and caught mistakes that I'm glad we caught before this book went into final form.